What is up, twisty throttlers? This is my 1985 Honda GL1200 Goldwing. We're at about 65,000 miles, which means I am far overdue for a timing belt. We're going to roll through the timing belt process today, as long as just try to fix or improve any of the other issues we find along the way. This motorcycle is not the prettiest Goldwing that you're going to find on the block, but I guarantee you she's got a lot more stories.
Alright, GL1200 junkies, I'm following Steve Saunders GL1200 Goldwing timing belts replacement video for this repair. He apparently also has a step-by-step how-to on his Goldwing Vax website, but I was unable to locate it. Every time I found a link, it would tell me the requested page could not be found, which seems to happen when I need specific instructions located on any forum of the web. We're getting started here with removing the seat first. This is done by removing the 10mm hex key on the left and the 8mm hex key on the right side of the seat. Once these are out, slide the seat back and lift it up from the rear. Next is the cargo containers on the front fairing. After removing the vinyl cover on the left and the plastic lid on the right, you can remove the tubs held in place with 4 Phillip head screws each. After the storage tubs, we move on to the Fox tank, which is held in place with 2 10mm bolts on the front and rear. Just taking a moment to assess the situation under the hood, I've completed a myriad of repairs to this wing, and I'm checking for any other improvements or repairs I can make to the electrical situation under the hood. Moving to the front of the bike, we progress with removing the lower fairings. These are held in place by 4 Phillips head screws. Make sure to collect the spacers along with each screw. If you don't remove them now, they are likely to fall out in transit of the fairing and are pretty difficult to find replacements. I've got these pretty sweet fog lights on the front of my ride. Although they take hours to set up and align, I can just push them out of the way after loosening this single bolt.
Alright guys, so we got the incidentals out of the way. Started with removing the seat, then on to the fairing, and now we're getting into the meat and potatoes. Gonna get the radiator off, drain the radiator fluid, and work our way into the timing belt cover.
The first step in removing the radiator is to remove the radiator cap located just to the right of the steering column. You'll want to push down and twist the radiator cap counterclockwise. With the radiator cap removed, we progress forward with removing the radiator overflow hose located just behind the radiator cap. I found it difficult to get the hose off of this location, so I just followed it back to the overflow tank and removed it from there. I'll have to guide this hose out from the bike as we slide the radiator out. The radiator is held to the bike by just 2 10mm bolts located on the lower side of the cooling unit. These same 2 bolts hold brackets for the lower fairing, so you'll want to keep track of those, along with the 2 dampening mounts which ease vibration to the radiator. Probably the funnest part of the job is removing the water pump cover, which is held in place by 2 8mm bolts. Once the bolts are out and your containment is in place, a stern knock to the cap should release the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle catalyst within. I'm just removing the fog light wire I have mounted to the radiator cover here. The next connection to sever the radiator from the bike is the upper radiator hose. This hose carries hot coolant from the engine to be cooled as it flows through the fins of the radiator. I had a bit of trouble breaking this hose free, so I used a piece of iron to pry the hose up and off of the fitting. The last connection to cleave the radiator from the bike is the radiator fan power wire located behind the unit. To gain access, I shimmy the radiator down, unclip the connection, and the radiator is free to be removed from the behemoth.
All right, it's a new day. I didn't have the belts ordered at the time I was taking all this apart, but that same day I was able to just hop on Amazon, and I ordered the Gates belt replacements. It was part T070. They were $10 on Amazon, and got here in 2 days. So we've got all the parts. We're gonna hop into getting the timing belt cover off, getting the old timing belts off, putting on the new ones, and wrapping this project up.
With the radiator removed from the bike, we have clear access to the two-piece timing belt cover, which is held to the bike with 4 6mm hex bolts. The bolts aren't all the same, so you'll want to keep track of their respective locations. To free the cover from the bike, I found it best to give a small tap with a wrench extension and a hammer on the drain hole vent located on the lower side of each cover. From there I used a screwdriver to gently pry the timing cover gasket from the engine case. With the timing cover removed, I was a little surprised at how loose this right side timing belt was. I could also see these belts were Napa brand, and this meant that the timing belt had been completed some time before I got the bike at the 52,000 mile mark. With both timing belt covers off, we're ready to remove the breather hose and unscrew the timing belt cap with a large flathead screwdriver. With the timing cap removed, you'll want to set the engine to top dead center. Using a 19mm wrench, rotate the crankshaft until the timing marks line up on both the left and right side cam pulleys. With the timing marks aligned, you should see a T1 through the timing window with a line through the center, aligned with the marks on the engine case. At this point, you could remove the spark plugs from the engine to ease the installation of the new timing belts, but it's not required. If you decide to leave the spark plugs in like I have, you'll have to deal with the compression of the engine moving around the cam pulleys, but it's manageable and will make a little more sense later in the video. To remove the belts from the bike, you will want to start by loosening the 2 bolts on the timing belt tensioners. Once loose, you will want to tighten the tensioners down in their fully extended position to remove tension pressure from the belts. With the belt tension removed, start with sliding the right side timing belt from the cam pulley. You can see here how the compression within the engine forced the pulley clockwise. No big deal though, we'll be able to realign the cam pulley for the installation of the new belt. Earlier in the video, I alluded to the action being caused by the compression within the engine, but thinking about this a little more, it's likely caused by the valve springs against the cam, and may still happen if you choose to remove your spark plugs prior to uninstalling the belt. Moving on to the left side of the bike, we want to remove tension from the timing belt by tightening down the tensioner in the fully extended or compressed position, depending how you're looking at it. An additional step for the left side belt is to remove the position sensor on the lower side of the crankshaft to allow the belt to clear the guide. The old belts removed from the bike are in pretty good shape. I'm assuming one of the previous owners replaced them at some point because I doubt Napa brand belts came stock on the GL1200. Even though the belts are free of any major defects, the lack of tension in the belt I showed earlier is a bit concerning. The GL1200 engine is an interference type engine, which means two different parts of the engine, usually the valve and the piston, occupy the same place at different intervals of the engine's 4 cycles. If the timing belts were to slip, these parts may try to occupy the same place at the same time, which would cause catastrophic failure. I chose Gates belts for my replacement because they have an awesome reputation, are made in the US, and offered at a fair price. I picked up 2 Gates T070 belts off of Amazon for just over 20 bucks. From reading on the forums, Gates 5043s will also work, as well as Napa 250-274, but those are 40 bucks a piece, and wise old men on the forums will tell you, Gates makes Napa's belts. At this point, we're ready to install the new belts. Starting on the left side of the bike, get the belt around the crankshaft pulley first, and either now or before the cover goes back on. You're going to want to reinstall the position or pulse sensor on the lower side of the crankshaft. Double check one last time that the timing marks on the cam pulley and crankcase are aligned, and slowly work the belt onto the pulley. At this point, the timing marks don't need to be spot on, but they should not be more than 1 tooth off of alignment with the pulley. You will be able to fine-tune alignment of the pulley with the markings on the case by adjusting the tension of the timing belt via the tensioner. Moving over to the right side of the engine, we repeat the same process, but remember, the pulley doesn't want to sit in the correct position on this side, so I use a wrench with a 12mm socket to keep the pulley's timing marks lined up. We now move on to setting the timing belt tensioners. You may want to look into the correct spec a little more than I did for this. I just set the tensioners by feel. The tension on the belt will also finally adjust the alignment of the timing marks of the pulley with the crankcase, so I'd suggest pushing down on the tensioners with the correct force to best align the timing marks. Getting the correct tension on the right side of the bike was a bit more difficult than the left because of the pulley wanting to rotate clockwise. So I used a flathead screwdriver to apply additional pressure to the tensioner and tightened it down in the location which provided the best alignment of the timing marks. To ensure you didn't misalign anything too poorly, you'll want to rotate the crankshaft 2 full rotations, which will provide 1 full rotation for each of the pulleys. This is not a foolproof test against having misaligned anything, but it should provide some peace of mind. Before attempting this, you'll want to ensure all 3 timing references are on point. This includes the 2 pulleys and the T1 mark inside the crankcase. If you've removed the spark plugs at the beginning of the replacement, you'll not be fighting the compression of the motor, but it's not required. Although probably not recommended until everything is put back together, you should be ready to start the bike up and ensure the job was a success. I wasn't about to put everything back together and have the timing somehow misaligned enough to not run right, but correctly aligned enough to not totally explode, so I fired her up a bit. Remember, there's no coolant in the bike, so I wouldn't suggest doing this for more than 30 seconds or so. And a word of advice, unless you want to be a goober like me, you'll want to remember to put the timing cover back on the crankcase. I forgot that little detail and I ended up throwing engine oil all over my crankcase. No big deal though, I was planning an oil change anyway. So at this point, you should be ready to assemble the bike in the reverse order that you took it apart. I'm going to just get my timing belt covers on for now because I plan to perform a few other repairs/upgrades before she's all back together. If this video helped you at all, please show your appreciation using the like button. If you got any questions, drop them in the comments. And if you want to keep up to date on my future projects and trips with the Adventure Wing, highlight that subscribe button. Some of the future Adventure Wing projects I've got coming up include addressing the Honda Civic fuel pump I installed after my stock fuel pump died on me. The Civic fuel pump has been working great, but it's quite a bit larger than the stock fuel pump, and I need to find a new location for it to fit behind the fairing. I've also been having trouble with my start button kicking in, so I'm going to take that apart and hopefully just give it a good cleaning, possibly tighten some loose screws in there, which is what happened to my kill switch a few years back. I've got a new stereo and speakers I plan to install because the existing unit has been kicking in and out, but that could be due to the high voltage of my bike's stator. I think mine runs around 15.5 volts. These bikes are known for bad stators, and although the so-called fix has been done to mine, I'm really hoping that's not an issue I have to deal with anytime soon. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to smash that notification button to stay up to date.